Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Lunatics Radio Hour podcast. I am April Brenker, sitting here with Alan Kudan.
Hello.
And today we are continuing on our odyssey into horror on the high seas with part 3, where we are exploring all things ships and pirates.
As we do.
As we do. This is a meaty episode in this series, which might be interesting to be at the third spot, but this is just sort of how the cookie crumbled, if you will.
Well, this episode will be a treasure chest of horror.
There you go. Very good.
That's stupid.
To recap, so far in this mega series, we have talked about the Bermuda Triangle, the Mariana Trench. We have talked about Atlantis, mermaids, sirens, the Kraken, Moby Dick, and of course, sharks. Now we're pivoting away from creatures and into some of the real fucked up things that pirates have done over the years to our
poor
innocent port town faring people.
What about those poor pirates?
Justice for pirates?
I didn't say that.
What did you say?
What about those poor pirates?
Yeah, but why are they poor?
Because they don't have their treasure.
I didn't realize you were such a pirate apologist. Okay, so how much do you know about Blackbeard? Because I knew very little.
Everything I know about Blackbeard, I have learned from either Treasure Island,
Okay.
Black Sails,
Oh, right. Yes. Great show.
which is just the prequel to Treasure Island.
Right.
And then there's also my absolute favorite of Our Flag Means Death.
Ah, yes. Okay.
A
Great.
show that you would love,
I
but you
know.
haven't watched it, and I don't know why.
Maybe this is the time. Maybe this is the message from the universe that I needed.
It has pirates.
Yeah.
It has big boats,
Love big boats.
a lot of sea action,
Sure.
and it's super, super gay.
We love a queer pirate love story. Okay. I'm convinced. What else do I need to know?
Do you know who plays Blackbeard in that?
No.
Guess.
Is he British? Hugh Grant.
Close.
Christopher Walken.
It's Taika Waititi.
And even more of a reason to watch the show.
Yeah, I didn't realize he was such a prolific actor.
Yeah. He's more of a filmmaker, no?
I guess he's both. I mean, he's still got one of the starring roles in the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, then he also goes on to make some of the best Marvel movies out there.
Sometimes you can just do it all. So let's talk about Blackbeard. Edward Teach, or Thatch, was born around 1860 and as an adult became known as Blackbeard, which is how we will refer to him. Blackbeard was an English pirate who lived on in infamy to this day. And I think it's a testament, right, that all of these shows and movies have been made about his story because that's how much of an impact he made on history. There were thousands and thousands of pirates across many different cultures, but I think Blackbeard has certainly become, at least in our modern era in the United States, a pirate staple, if you will.
I mean, can you name any other famous pirate?
Isn't Bluebeard a pirate?
Yeah, technically.
But I don't know much about him.
No, he just seems like store brand Blackbeard.
I also know that there was a female pirate in China who is like one of the most successful pirates of all time.
Oh, yeah, she's in one of the later Pirates of the Caribbean.
Oh, cool. In 1976, Teach joined the ranks of another British pirate, Captain Benjamin Hornigold, and Blackbeard became renowned when he captured a French slave ship. He decked out the boat with 40 guns and crewed it with 300 men. He renamed it Queen Anne's Revenge. Its original name was La Concorde. Blackbeard gained a grueling reputation. He was known for his dark hair. It was said he would even tuck lit fuses under his hat to scare his enemies. He blockaded the town of Port Charleston in South Carolina and held the town ransom for almost a week. But here's the real plot twist. What he was after was a chest of medicine. And finally, when it arrived, he released his hostages.
That's a stand-up guy right there.
He turns out to be a real stand-up guy at the end of the day. After finally running Queen Anne's Revenge aground in North Carolina, he eventually settled there and accepted a royal pardon. But after setting sail again, he was killed after a terrible battle with a party sent to pursue him by the governor of Virginia. So kind of how it went was he received this royal pardon. He started living in North Carolina as like an everyday man. And there were still all these people that kind of didn't want to accept that, right? And so the second he was out again in his boat, they descended upon him.
Sure.
On November 22nd, 1718, Blackbeard was dead. Despite his horrifying reputation, Blackbeard more often used his doctored image to elicit fear and avoided the use of violence. So he was kind of this pirate who did a lot to get this very bad reputation just because he wanted his enemies to fear him, but he was actually more of a pacifist. Like, he preferred to not use violence.
Yeah, Abby, I've seen the show.
Well, I haven't, and I can't assume that everybody listening has.
Wait a minute. I keep talking about Treasure Island and Black Sails, but that was Long John Silver.
So maybe you don't know as much as you think.
No, he's 100% in Our Flag Means Death. Maybe he's not in those. Hang on. Okay, I looked it up. I was confused because I can picture him, but maybe I was getting confused. He is in Black Sails, but in one of the later seasons. So he is in the show.
Got it.
But it's a prequel to Treasure Island. So I was like, well, if he's in a later thing, maybe that. No, he's not. He's not in Treasure Island, but they do talk about him.
So he's in Black Sails, Our Flag Means Death, and not in Treasure Island.
He's talked about
He's
in
referenced.
Treasure Island. Yes.
Yes. Okay, fair enough.
But
So you were right.
But yeah, I was thinking of Long John Silver.
Right. So after his death, he became a characterization that inspired the pirate archetype in literature.
Well, he's also in the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. And they do the really cool thing where, I guess he was famous for putting like sparklers or something in his beard.
Yep,
Or,
exactly.
like sparklers
That
or
fuses
smoking.
in his hat. Yeah.
Yeah, something. And like they do that in Pirates. And that's cool. It's scary.
Yeah. It's a badass thing to do. It's like a party trick, that he used to make everybody quake in their boots.
Yeah, it's terrifying. I mean, if someone just walks in on fire
Yeah.
and is like, I'm fine with this, why aren't you fine with this? Then, I'm immediately at a disadvantage.
There you go. While Blackbeard certainly remains the most famous historic pirate, there are a few others you should know about if you really want to round out your pirate education.
As I do.
If you're familiar with Disney's Pirates of the Caribbean, which
I am.
Alan is, you might recognize the name of the Barbossa brothers. Barbossa means red beard in Italian, which I guess a lot of the pirates are named blank color beard.
Not to be confused with the red caps.
The red caps?
Yeah, we talk about red caps a surprising
and the
amount
goblin,
on this podcast.
The Barbossa brothers sailed from Africa's Barbary coast and captured European ships. And so I think that's kind of interesting that they took that name Barbossa in the Disney movies, right? And
Where is the Barbary Coast?
okay, so we're just reading from Wikipedia. The Barbary Coast was the name given to the coastal regions of Central and Western North Africa, or more specifically, the Maghreb and Ottoman borderlands.
Well, a big chunk of Africa.
A lot of it seems to be northern. It's sort of like, I'm looking at a map, it's kind of like
Morocco.
right, exactly. Like what was across the river from,
Sure.
the river. What was across the sea from, yeah. Okay. Sir Francis Drake, in my opinion, is kind of like the worst kind of pirate because he was an above-the-board pirate, if you will, which means that he was commissioned by the English to attack Spanish ships. Queen Elizabeth I even called him, quote, my pirate, end quote. But, it's kind of like the spirit, I feel like, of being a pirate is not to be like hired by the royal family. It's to be out there doing the good deed of taking down the rich and powerful.
Abby, this is literally the plot of one of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies.
Wow, they really have it all covered, huh?
I mean, they do. Once Barbossa comes back, sorry, spoilers, he takes up that exact contract of working for the Queen.
Yeah.
And just, he becomes this pirate that turns on other pirates for money. But, it's like, it's a pirate, right? Do whatever the fuck you want.
Yeah.
But he has his, like, little pardon. And he pretends to be all royalty with his, like, fancy wig and stuff. And everyone makes fun of him. And that's, like, the whole plot point of, like, what does it really mean
Right.
to be a pirate,
Yeah, man. So while we're
You
talking,
gotta watch these movies. They come up all the time.
I've seen a lot of them, but they kind of jump the shark at some point, and they become quite like I remember when I was watching. Me and my family would always go. We were movie people. We would go to the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. But when the Sea Witch is like 100 feet tall, it's just kind of like, you lost me a bit here on this one.
Yeah, once it gets mythological, it is a bit hit or miss.
It's not scary anymore. It's like it gets like a little silly and cheesy.
Sometimes, but it kind of comes back.
Okay, well maybe I'll give them a go.
Then what's the one? Well, so the one you're talking about is At World's End. But then what's the one with Javier Bardem where he's like the undead Spanish pirate?
I don't know.
It's freaking cool. Like, he's the only saving grace of that movie.
I'll say like when the first Pirates came out, and there's that scene where all the skeletons are walking across the ocean floor.
They weren't skeletons; they were zombies.
Okay, but in the trailer, before I knew that, it was very spooky and very exciting at the time. Like when that movie came out, it was very good. And I watched it many, many times with my friends, you know, so I'm not trying to diminish the franchise. I just think at a certain point, it got a little silly.
The first movie is a masterpiece. It's not straight downhill. It's a bit of a bumpy road, but it does go down.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. However, this is a very, I know we are always about the latest and greatest here on Lunatics Radio Hour.
That's right.
And Disney has officially announced Johnny Depp's replacement for the next Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Great, because we need to get abusive people out of powerful positions.
Well, Walt Disney's dead.
I'm talking about Johnny Depp.
What's wrong with Johnny Depp?
All right, I can't educate you on everything all the time. I just don't have time. So while we're talking about pirates, let's talk about walking the plank, because I went on a little side quest here because I'm quite endlessly fascinated with how certain phrases from history linger on and others don't. But anyway, this was a style of execution that was used for special situations. A wooden plank was extended over the edge of a ship, and captives were tied up so that they could not swim after the descent. The earliest known use of the phrase dates back to 1788. It appeared in the second edition of Francis Gross's Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue.
Hold on. Can we get a copy of the Dictionary of the Vulgar Tongue?
Doesn't it kind of remind you of like Urban Dictionary?
I mean, yeah, this guy just started Urban Dictionary.
Right.
He really should have patented it.
Yes, we can absolutely get a copy. Quote, walking the plank, a mode of destroying devoted persons or officers in a mutiny on shipboard by blindfolding them and obliging them to walk on a plank laid over the ship's side. By this means, as the mutineers suppose, avoiding the penalty of murder, end quote.
Oh, I see. Because they're basically killing themselves.
Baltic-based pirate John Durdrake was known for making all of his victims walk the plank in the late 1700s. In 1769, mutineer George Wood confessed to his chaplain in Newgate Prison that they had forced the officers to walk the plank. Of course, Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island is filled with instances of walking the plank, 3 to be exact. And I think a lot of us were first introduced to the practice, and probably the reason it's remained in the zeitgeist is from Peter Pan.
You think so?
I mean, I just remember watching that as like, I'm trying to think of, okay, why would I, as a kid in the 90s, have been so familiar with walking the plank as pirates? And I think it must have been because it was in, for me, Peter Pan, and I watched the animated Peter Pan Disney movie a bit. But no other way would I have intersected with that little bit of knowledge.
Does that happen in that movie?
Yeah, they try to get him to walk the plank.
But he can fly.
No, they don't.
That's a dumb way. That's the dumbest possible way to kill someone that can fly.
Right? I think it happens in Hook too.
Okay, Peter can still fly.
No, I'm trying. I don't think they. I think the Lost Boys try to get Captain Hook to walk the plank into the crocodile's mouth.
Crocodile's dead in Hook. He's stuffed. That's the whole point.
Okay, I'm talking about Peter Pan now.
Okay, well, what happens there?
What I just said.
What happens?
That the Lost Boys try to get Captain Hook to walk the plank into the alligator's mouth. Because remember that scene where his legs do like a split into the alligator's jaw?
They gaslight him into walking his own plank?
No, they force him. They like storm the ship.
Wow.
Yeah.
There's like 6 of them.
Okay, maybe. No, there's way more than 6. Maybe you need to watch Peter Pan.
I don't think I've ever seen it.
You've never seen Peter Pan?
No.
Oh my God, it's so good.
I've seen Hook a bunch.
Yeah, well, I guess that
With
explains
Robin
a lot.
Williams?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's pretty good.
Yeah.
You remember when you had to walk the plank and did a really bad job?
That wasn't the plank.
It was literally called the plank.
It was a plank.
It was
It
called.
was not off of a boat.
The game was called The Plank.
Okay, let's set the scene. It's like our 3rd or 4th date. Alan brings me to a VR pop-up shop in New York City with his friend and hooks me up to a VR headset where there's like 50 other people in this room. And I'm supposed to walk the plank off of the edge of a skyscraper. And it's so realistic looking that I physically can't do it. And him and his friend are just staring at me. And that was the moment we knew.
You remember it very differently.
Tell me how you remember it.
So there you were, looking radiant.
Uh-huh. Well, I remember that too.
Are you telling this or am I?
Go ahead.
And you said, Alan, I just want to play VR. And I said, okay, what game do you want to play? And you said, this one. This one looks really, really fun.
Yeah.
And it's called The Plank. And it's really simple. All you got to do is you put on the VR headset and there's a plank and you just walk and you just have to jump off. That's it. And you're just standing on solid ground the entire time. There's not even like a fake wooden plank to stand on. Like, you can feel it. You can, tap your feet all over, but you just have to physically jump or step off, and you were too scared because it fucks with your brain.
Yeah, but don't you think this would have better prepared you for my reaction in Mexico when you were jumping off the edge of the cenote and I couldn't do it?
Did I jump off?
You jumped off immediately. And then I was up there for like 20 minutes and everyone was chanting for me until I finally did it because the lifeguard was like, don't look down, look out. And then I was able to do it.
Wait, I remember you did it. I did it?
You did it 5 times.
I don't remember that at all. I just remember watching you up there not jumping.
You think that I would have allowed the pressure for me and not you?
Oh, right. Yes.
No.
It's a dumb story to share with the world.
All right, let's talk about legendary ships.
What's your favorite ship of all time?
A real ship or a legendary ship?
Doesn't matter.
I think the one that I'm about to talk about is up there.
Really?
The Flying Dutchman. I also think the Titanic is up there.
That's a good one.
Dating back to the 18th century, the Flying Dutchman is one of the most infamous ghost ships of all time. It originated with maritime legend around the Netherlands. The story goes that a Captain Vanderdecken...
Captain Vanderdecken?
This is in the Netherlands. Captain Vanderdecken.
Did he start the show?
What is that? What are you saying?
Vanderdeck rules?
So Captain Vanderdecken was meant to port in the Cape of Good Hope, but struggled because of a storm, so he was having issues getting the boat in. He swore that he would indeed dock, even if he had to keep trying until Judgment Day. And of course, the story goes that the devil overheard him. And the Dutchman was stuck at sea forever, similar to purgatory. The only cure was if he found a woman who loved him enough to swear allegiance to him forever, no matter his sentence. So no matter if he was stuck at sea forever or, in hell, she would love him. He had the chance to go to shore once every 7 years to look for such a woman. Furthermore, it became legend to see glimpses of the ghostly and condemned ship during storms. The story has inspired many plays, operas, poems, novels, and films.
Including the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise.
God damn it. Wagner's opera from 1843, simply called The Flying Dutchman, along with John Boyle O'Reilly's poem of the same name, are incredibly famous. People also draw comparisons to the ghost ship from Coleridge's The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And of course, Disney's The Pirates of the Caribbean franchise plays with this legend in a big way.
And please elaborate.
Well, you have the Black Pearl, right?
Yeah.
Which is like the Flying Dutchman.
Yeah, and then it has to outrun the Flying Dutchman, and it can't.
Because the Flying Dutchman was faster.
Well, it depends. If the Pearl has the wind, they're okay. But if they don't have the wind, the Dutchman wins.
Which one are you rooting for?
Abby, this is such a plot point of the whole series.
Who's on board which one?
It depends on which movie and who's captain of which ship.
Okay, well, then I can't really have an opinion.
You can. I do.
What's your opinion? I asked you 2 minutes ago.
I mean, the Dutchman is like a big... it can go underwater, which is kind of cool.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and like that's kind of how they win because they don't need wind to sail around. They use the tides. They don't use the tides. They can control water, sort of. Just like a magically self-propelled ship. But the Pearl is just a mildly enchanted ship that just is stupidly fast.
The first reference of the Flying Dutchman is from a text called Travels in Various Parts of Europe, Asia, and Africa during a series of 36 years and upwards, and that's the title, from 1790 by John MacDonald. It reads, quote, "The weather was so stormy that the sailors said that they saw the Flying Dutchman. The common story is that the Dutchman came to the Cape in distress of weather and wanted to get into harbor, but could not get a pilot to conduct her, and was lost, and that ever since in very bad weather her vision appears," end quote. 5 years later, George Barrington wrote this as part of his work A Voyage to Botany Bay.
Was he part of the Barrington Bears?
Quote, "I had often heard of the superstition of sailors respecting apparitions and doom, but had never given much credit to the report. It seems that some years since a Dutch man-of-war was lost off the Cape of Good Hope, and every soul on board perished. Her consort weathered the gale, and arrived soon after at the Cape. Having refitted and returning to Europe, they were assailed by a violent tempest nearly in the same latitude. In the night watch, some of the people saw, or imagined they saw, a vessel standing for them under a press of sail, as though she would run them down. One in particular affirmed it was the ship that had foundered in the former gale, and that it must certainly be her, or the apparition of her. But, on its clearing up, the object, a dark, thick cloud, disappeared. Nothing could do away with the idea of this phenomenon on the minds of the sailors, and, on their relating the circumstances when they arrived in port, the story spread like wildfire, and the supposed phantom was called the Flying Dutchman, and then from the Dutch, the English seamen got the information." End quote. But let's talk about some of the reported sightings throughout history. One of the most famous sightings, mainly because of the creed of people who claimed to see the ship, was when the future King George V and Prince Albert Vicar of Wales wrote about her in their own ship's log from 1881. Quote, "July 11th, at 4 a.m., the Flying Dutchman crossed our bows. A strange red light as a phantom ship all aglow, in the mists of which light the masts, spars, and sails of a brig 200 yards distant stood out in strong relief as she came up on the port bow, where also the officer of the watch from the bridge clearly saw her, as did the quarter-deck midshipman, who was sent forward at once to the forecastle. But on arriving, there was no vestige, nor any sign whatever of any material ship, was to be seen either near or right away to the horizon, the night being clear and the sea calm. 13 persons altogether saw her. At 10:45 a.m., the ordinary seaman, who had this morning reported the Flying Dutchman, fell from the foretop mast, crossed trees on the top gallant forecastle, and was smashed to atoms." End quote. That log I find really interesting because, again, this was a log from the ship that the future King George V and Prince Albert Vicar of Wales were on. They wrote that not only did 13 people on this boat claim to see the Flying Dutchman because of this red glow and this strange phantomness associated with it, that the person who initially claimed that then fell from this top mast and was, smithereened, if you will.
Smithereened.
Yeah, it's pretty sad. So it's a bit of a spooky ship log entry, I think. A real historic ship log.
Sure.
What do you think, Alan? What do you think of the Flying Dutchman?
I don't think it's real. Seems too made up.
Well, I guess that's a good point. A more modern example of a ghost ship is the Mary Celeste.
Oh, here we go.
She was an American merchant ship that was discovered floating under partial sail on December 4th, 1872, with absolutely no one on board. The Mary Celeste had departed New York City for Genoa, bringing 1,700 bottles of alcohol to England on November 7th, 1872. She was captained by Benjamin Spooner Briggs, who wrote to his mother a few days before the voyage, quote,
His middle name was Spooner?
Spooner. His friends called him Spoonsy.
Is that true?
Maybe. I don't know.
I hope he had friends.
So this is his letter to his mother, quote, "Our vessel is in beautiful trim, and I hope we shall have a fine passage," end quote. It's foreshadowing. We also know that Briggs was a cautious captain. For example, when the ship set sail from Pier 50 in Manhattan, he decided to dock just off the coast of Staten Island for a few days because of bad weather. The ship was discovered adrift by a passing Canadian brigantine called the Dei Gratia, which was actually captained by a friend of the Mary Celeste's captain. So you can imagine how distressed he was to see that. The Dei Gratia also left New York City on the same route, but a week later. So that captain was Captain Morehouse. He at first observed the erratic and random movements of the Mary Celeste as extremely concerning and decided to board. The Mary Celeste was still provisioned with 6 months of food when found. Her lifeboat was missing, and the last log entry was dated 10 days earlier. The glass covering over the compass was broken. The captain and crew's personal belongings were thrown about but not missing, including a sword that was found under the captain's bed. So weapons were left, items were left. No one on board was ever heard from again. One thing about the Mary Celeste that's fascinating is that she was actually thought to be a cursed ship. From the time of her maiden voyage, she was met with accidents, sick crew members, and collisions. She was eventually sold because she was run aground. The new owner renamed her from Amazon, her original name, to Mary Celeste.
You bought her from Amazon?
Her original name was Amazon.
Oh.
And then they sort of tried to hide her as not a cursed ship and buried the legends by renaming her, rebranding her, if you will.
Typical.
They brought on a new marketing officer. So as the Mary Celeste, she had an uneventful bit of time doing timber and trade runs to England and the West Indies. But when she was discovered abandoned, the ship's interior was wet and damaged, but still functional. She wasn't leaking, and some sails were raised, right? So it's kind of this question of, okay, there's damage on the inside. She's wet on the inside. She's not leaking. She's not sinking. What happened here? Oddly, most of the ship's papers and navigational equipment were missing. The missing people included Captain Brigg, his wife, an infant daughter, and 7 crew members. The last log entry was dated 8 a.m. on November 25th and positioned the boat about 400 miles from where it was discovered, off the coast of the Azores. Following this entry, it seems the crew were navigating fairly accurately, and then suddenly there was a deviation to the north. It's very atypical for an experienced captain like Briggs to leave the boat, especially when it was clear the ship was not going to sink. So let's talk about some leading theories.
I have my own.
Great, I cannot wait to hear them. First and foremost, there are many theories around conspiracy. For example, that Briggs and Morehouse were in cahoots for insurance money, or that Morehouse lured Briggs and crew off of the ship and staged the incident for salvage rewards. Mostly, they have no evidence, though, and this can easily be disproven. Another major theory is mutiny. At the time, investigators thought they found strange marks on the ship, which could have been caused by an axe, coupled with bloodstains. However, it was later proven that the presumed bloodstains were not blood, and the markings were normal wear and tear. Pirates and other looters are generally out of the question because the ship's cargo and personal effects were still intact. Some conspiracy theorists believe that aliens could be at work here, and I must admit I love the aesthetic of a maritime alien abduction from the 1800s, but why would a lifeboat be missing? I think the most relevant theory is that extreme weather scared off the crew. Maybe they thought that they were closer to the shore than they were and could make it out in a lifeboat. And just for context, that November, hundreds of vessels had been lost to rocky seas and storms. So it was a particularly bad weather year. Another theory that I am partial to is that there could have been a small explosion from the cargo, because again, it was so much alcohol. Or the crew thought that an explosion was inevitable, scaring them off of the ship. They took the navigational equipment, they left most of their stuff because they were going on a small lifeboat, and they were like, okay, we're going to make it to shore. But my thought is that if the captain and crew were convinced the ship was going to explode for some reason, perhaps because of the cargo, it makes sense that they would have gone onto the lifeboat, again, with only the navigational equipment. Especially because it was fairly common for cargo ships containing alcohol to endure minor explosions and fires. So maybe they thought we're just going to wait out, this small explosion and we'll come back. So those are my theories, Alan. What are yours?
You ever fired a gun?
Never. Have you?
So when you fire a gun...
Have you?
When you fire a gun,
Okay.
An explosion is made, right? And then in that brief moment, there's a vacuum. And then a bunch of atmosphere rushes back into that little pocket. And that's also like what's used to collect like DNA evidence from firing because it like sucks a bunch of stuff into like this little area of the gun. That's what happened.
Explain.
A space-time event exploded and then ripped back in and sucked all the crew members in, but left the gun, which was the ship.
So you think it was paranormal?
That is the exact analogy and theory presented in the very stupid movie, The Haunting of the Mary Celeste.
Which you just watched moments ago.
I did, and it's stupid.
So you don't recommend it?
I mean, it had some cool ideas, but the execution was really dumb. So this woman was like a paranormal investigator in modern day, being like, I gotta get to the bottom of this mystery. And so she charters a boat, and he's like, what? Why? It's like really old. She's like, trust me. And so we get out there, and then like, yeah, some spooky stuff starts happening. And like, it's that pocket of the ocean that's like a little space-time anomaly.
Yeah.
And then lo and behold, one by one, the crew members on that boat start going a little nuts and then disappearing because they keep getting ripped into this like water dimension. Yeah, it's kind of dumb, but I like the idea of like you know how sometimes you have hauntings that are the ghosts are tied to the space, and even after the space is demolished and rebuilt, people still say they see the ghosts because this was the space where it once happened.
Yeah, exactly, like an echo.
Yeah, and that's like what it is, but instead it's like for an above water section of the ocean.
Sure.
Like, yeah, sure, that's kind of neat. I like that. But it was a dumb movie. And apparently she was also like fooling everyone because she was really just searching for her daughter that I guess went missing on this boat hundreds of years ago. Huh. And I'm like, you lost me here. Are you old, or did your daughter get lost on another expedition? I don't know. I was following this this movie with a fine-tooth comb. But that's fine. The captain was kind of cool. And, he's like, every time the woman was like doing dumb things that was absolutely sabotaging the safety of his vessel, he would be the only sane person until she like showed him some paranormal stuff. And he's like, oh, it's kind of cool. But that was basically the whole movie.
Nice. Sorry
for the spoilers. It's dumb.
Well, yeah, I don't think you're really selling it to people. So why has the story of Mary Celeste, one of many stories of ghost ships, been immortalized, right? Even to the point where there's all these films about it. We can thank our friend Sir Arthur Conan Doyle for that. Doyle took the facts of the Mary Celeste events and reskinned them for his story called J. Habakkuk Jeffson's Statement, which was published in 1884. He called the ship the Marie Celeste, I know, quite different from the truth, and he called the captain Tibbs, so really creative liberties he took.
Captain Tibbs?
From Briggs to Tibbs, from Mary Celeste to Marie Celeste. I also don't recommend seeking this story out because it takes a blatantly racist twist dependent on mutiny and kidnap.
A story from the 1800s takes a racist twist.
Who would have thought? Though there are many ghost ships, I want to mention only one more. The legend of the ghost ship of Northumberland Strait claims that people have seen a ship sailing ablaze down the passageway. And I thought it was pretty metal to see kind of like this ghost ship on fire. The legend is at least 200 years old. As horrified folks observe, a beautiful schooner with 4 masts slowly becomes totally engulfed in flames. It's thought to be a warning that a storm is coming.
Yeah, you just, what's the weather going to be like today? A giant burning ship. I think it's going to rain.
Some onlookers have even described seeing crew members on board. In 2008, 2 people claimed to see the ship in Tatamagochi Bay. It was described as a bright white and gold ship. Some have pointed to natural phenomena, like St. Elmo's fire, to explain these sightings.
I don't know. I feel like lots of ships over the years have burned, probably engraved themselves in people's memory because, like, holy cow, that's crazy.
Yeah. I know that you don't believe in the paranormal, and I do, but I do think it's fun. It's a fun kind of like, twist to believe in the maritime paranormal. Not convinced, though, huh?
So, I mean, we did this whole series on ghost ships.
Very, very long ago.
Not series, episode. We did an episode on ghost ships. I don't think we even had stories then.
I think there was one that I wrote.
Was it good?
I doubt it.
Tracks. So I don't know if I had seen this yet, but I did see a really cool ghost ship movie. Not the movie Ghost Ship, which is freaking awesome.
That scene will be forever burned in my brain.
Yep. Can't tell you anything else that happens in that movie, but that opening, holy cow. One of the best openings of any film. If they had just put that opening over any other movie, that other movie's much better.
There you go.
But I did see Blood Vessel.
Okay.
I don't know if we ever talked about this one.
I don't know.
It's freaking cool.
Okay, tell us more.
So it takes place just after World War II. World War II or World War I? One of the world wars. And like everyone is on their way home. And the movie opens in a lifeboat. A bunch of Allied soldiers plus civilians that were just traveling the Atlantic when they got hit with a storm, and now they're in a lifeboat. They come across a vessel, and of course they hail it down because they're in a lifeboat. And they get on board and there's nobody there. And like that, suspicious, right?
Yeah.
And the further they dig, they realize that it is vacant for a very, very important reason.
Which is what?
Well, do you want the spoiler? Because I don't want to give the spoiler.
Okay.
Just watch the movie. It's freaking cool.
Blood Vessel.
We've seen, it's a common trope where in a last-ditch effort for survival, our group of survivors climb onto a boat only to find out that there's no one else on the boat, or is there? And then it's either ghosts, paranormal, there was a plague on the boat, they've now stepped into an alternate dimension. You know, these are all different tropes that have popped up. And like this one was particularly cool and followed my preferred formula of really, really scary, intense, and then turns total badass.
Fun. Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
That's a good sell. That also kind of reminds me of a video game that you and I played called Man from Medan.
I think it's Man of Medan.
But yeah. It starts out where you're scuba diving, which is fun and cool in modern times. And then the little vessel you're on, there's some drama with pirates and all that. But you come upon a ghost ship, and it's quite scary to have to play the game and board this ship, right? And there's a lot of jump scares. It's a horror game. And I don't want to give a lot away, but a lot of the themes that we've talked about are quite relevant to that game.
Oh, for sure. Everything starts hunky-dory. Everyone's on vacation.
Yeah.
And then modern day pirates show up and kind of crash the party. And in a last-ditch effort for survival, people are kind of fleeing. And out of the nowhere, this gigantic ship, it's like rusting Hulk, is right there. So they climb on board. Paranormal stuff ensues because it's a holdover ship from World War II.
It's part of the Dark Anthology series, and it's, to me, I think that it's kind of like a watered-down version of Until Dawn, Or what's the the quarry?
Until Dawn is not part of that series.
I know, that's what I'm saying.
It is. It's
Until Dawn and the quarry are so much better than the Dark Anthology series, but the Dark Anthology games help scratch our itch while we wait for the next big video game.
Yeah, it's fun. The whole series is fun. Some are better than others.
It's kind of like a play your way through your own horror movie, which I love.
While it's much more straightforward than like Until Dawn or any of the like bigger budget ones, it's still just a super fun playthrough, and it's really quick. It's a good partner game.
Yeah, it was really fun to lock ourselves in our apartment, if you will, for an evening or two and play through it as if we were watching a movie, like a choose your own adventure movie together. So that was nice.
And big fan of any game that can be beaten quickly.
Yes. My patience is limited.
No, we just have adult schedules.
It's true. For real ships, ship graveyards can refer to either actual places where scrapped ship parts are piled, or places where, due to dangerous circumstances, the wrecks of boats seem to pile up. So let's talk about the latter.
I mean, it's crazy. It's just like elephant graveyards. We don't know why ships gather there to die, but it's undeniable.
That's a good joke.
You like that, huh?
Yeah. The Seven Stones Reef is off the coast of Cornwall. The reef is nearly 2 miles long and is made up of multiple groupings of rocks. There are at least 71 confirmed and known wrecks here, but all in, there's thought to be up to 200 shipwrecks. And remember, I think all the way in episode 1 of Horror on the High Seas, I talked about how there's 3 million shipwrecks at the bottom of the ocean floor, estimated. It's just kind of crazy, those numbers. Blackpool and the Fylde Coast are also considered a ship graveyard. This one is located in Lancaster, England, home to at least 22 shipwrecks. There have also been many, many shipwrecks off the Skeletal Coast in Namibia. In Sweden, there's also a ship cemetery, though this cemetery was intentional. Between 1500 and 1650, 6 ships were sunk here to create an artificial barrier. The idea was that this would protect the nearby naval base from the entry of unwanted boats. Though we don't know the oldest shipwreck, modern humans have rediscovered some very old ones. Many point to the Dokos wreck, which dates back to between 2700 and 2200 BCE. They discovered this by dating the clay pottery found on the wreck, so that's how they were able to date it.
2700 BCE. Wow.
The remains are in between 50 and 100 feet of water and are located off the coast of Greece in the Aegean Sea. There is also a famous wreck in Kyrenia. This wreck is located near Cyprus and was excavated in the 1960s. It was about 2,300 years old, which makes the ship a contemporary with Alexander the Great. The main cargo on board were over 400 different wine amphora from different ports. A lot of the wine also had the marks of potters from Rhodes, so some scholars believe that that was the home port of the ship. And 9,000 almonds that were perfectly preserved.
Who counted them?
Some little science nerd, you know?
These aren't as old, but I just forwarded you a very pressing article from country102.5.com.
Okay.
About the 5 most haunted shipwrecks off the coast of Cape Cod. I don't know why all these pirates are up in Cape Cod, but they were. And a bunch of their pirate treasure was salvaged from their pirate wrecks and now is on display in the Pirate Museum.
Oh, interesting. It says here that Cape Cod is often referred to as the ocean graveyard.
Isn't that crazy?
I guess we know where we're going on August trip.
Where the hell is... Why are pirates going to Cape Cod?
I don't think it's pirates. I think it's ships, right? It's a huge ship. It's a huge port area.
But what a pirate... Oh, I guess they go for the other boats.
Why are you talking about pirates?
Because there's pirate ships. You can't sink a pirate ship without pirates.
The Whydah Galley from 1717 is perhaps Cape Cod's most famous wreck. I'm reading from the Country 102.5 article. It was a slave ship, and it was commandeered by the pirate Black Sam Bellamy and laden with a fortune. Interesting. But is it haunted?
The name of the article says it is.
Doesn't say anything in here about being haunted.
Sure doesn't.
How do you know, unless you're scuba diving, how do you know that a shipwreck is haunted?
Why would scuba diving matter?
Because how are you interacting with the haunted ship unless you're on it?
You got me there, Abby.
Do you believe in haunted ghost ships? If you don't believe in legendary ships?
No.
I want to talk about Davy Jones's locker.
Oh, good. So we're back to Pirates of the Caribbean.
Davy Jones's locker is a metaphor for the vastness of the ocean. Some liken it to an abyss. But more so, it's a reference to the graveyard at the bottom of the ocean floor for sailors and ships alike. It's estimated again that there are over 3 million shipwrecks on the ocean's floor. And even more people, right, that have gone down with these ships. Davy Jones is often described as the sailor's devil. The first reference in written work dates back to 1726 in Daniel Defoe's work, The 4 Years' Voyages of Captain George Roberts. Quote, "Some of Lowe's company said they would look out some things and give me along with me when I was going away. But Ruffle told them they should not, for he would toss them all into Davy Jones's locker if they did." End quote. Obviously, the language there is a little choppy, but you get the point. But I am partial to this quote from some years later in 1751 from Tobias Smollett's The Adventures of Peregrine Pickle.
By who?
Tobias Smollett.
Sorry, what was the name?
The Adventures of Peregrine Pickle.
Can you please describe Peregrine Pickle?
Maybe you should read it, but here's a quote from it. Quote, "This same Davy Jones, according to sailors, is the friend that presides over all of the evil spirits of the deep, and is often seen in various shapes, perching among the rigging on the eve of hurricanes, shipwrecks, and other disasters to which seafaring life is exposed, warning the devoted wretch of death and woe." End quote.
Wait, Peregrine Pickle is this Rafe?
Peregrine Pickle is just, I think, a sea-timey person who went on some adventures. And this is a quote from the book. All right?
Hi, I'm Peregrine Pickle. Probably wondering who I am. I'm just a sea-timing guy going on some adventures.
Exactly.
Come along with me.
You get it. There's much speculation to the root of the legend of Davy Jones's locker and how the name Davy Jones became associated with so much negativity. But one theory relates back to a dictionary definition of one David Jones and another to a newspaper article, but it seems it's been hard to pin down with any certainty for historians. This is the perfect segue into the superstitions of sailors.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. We haven't talked about Davy Jones personified.
Personified in Pirates of the Caribbean?
That's correct.
Okay, you have 20 seconds.
What do you mean?
Go.
Describe him, please.
He's a man he has a actual chest at the bottom of the ocean.
The chest is not in the ocean. That is a big plot point. The chest is on land.
Well, that seems silly. It goes against everything that it should have been based on historically.
He can't go on land because Davy Jones commands the Dutchman. So he has the same curse of can only step on land once every 7 years. That said, he draws a lot of his look from Cthulhu.
Finally, we're circling back to Cthulhu because last episode you gaslit me into telling me that it was stupid to even be talking about him.
He's got the tentacle face, but he also has a big crab claw, which Cthulhu does not have.
No, they had to take some artistic liberties.
Also, Cthulhu does not captain a sea vessel.
Well, maybe not in the original.
He doesn't need to. He hates sea vessels. Sea vessels are his undoing.
Why are they his undoing?
Because in the stupidest ending of any book ever, the protagonist says, okay, so I lived through this, so, you know what happens, but I'm just going to tell you anyways, and it's still going to suck. So I, rode really fast, and I bumped into him, and got him.
All right, anything else you want to say about Davy Jones and his locker?
Nothing except that he's played by the fantastic Bill Nye.
You love Bill Nye.
He's the best.
He's the best. So this is the perfect segue into the superstitions of sailors. Because this is a dark history podcast, we're going to talk about some of the unlucky omens. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in the morning, sailors take warning. This age-old rhyme is a very well-known example of a mariner's superstition. This one, however, is based in some reality. I'm going to quote from Wikipedia here just to explain the science so I don't fuck it up. Quote, "This saying actually has some scientific validity, although it assumes storm systems will approach from the west, and is therefore generally correct only at mid-latitudes, where, due to the rotation of the Earth, prevailing winds travel east to west. If the morning skies are red, it is because clear skies over the horizon to the east permit the sun to light the undersides of moisture-bearing clouds. Conversely, to see red clouds in the evening, sunlight must have a clear path from the west, so therefore the prevailing westerly wind must be bringing clear skies." End quote. It is also believed to be unlucky to set sail on a Friday. It is bad luck to change the name of a boat. Sailors often got tattoos of a rooster and a pig on each foot because they thought that this would save them from drowning. No bananas or women allowed on board.
Why no bananas?
That's just the truth.
Why?
The superstition that bananas are bad luck dates back to 1700s, when many ships carrying bananas were lost or ill-fated.
All those monkey pirates.
Red heads were thought to be bad luck. Passing the salt directly to another sailor was bad luck. Turning a loaf of bread upside down. Stirring tea with a knife or fork. It was also bad luck for a wife to say goodbye or call out to her sailor husband before the voyage after they left the house.
Yoo-hoo.
Whistling or singing into the wind was considered bad luck because it was thought that it could conjure up a storm. Cutting your nails, hair, or beard was considered bad luck. Maybe that's why so many of the pirates had beard names. Losing a hat overboard was a sign of bad luck to come. And that's just to name a few.
Well, yeah, you just lost your hat. That's bad luck.
Conversely, cats are seen as good luck.
Yeah, but that's also because they eat the mice on board and the rats, so they don't get into all the provisions.
Well, a lot of superstitions have a root in something, right?
And then you have Unsinkable Sam.
Who's Unsinkable Sam?
You don't know about Unsinkable Sam?
No.
Unsinkable Sam was a cat that, I was going to say served during World War II, but, as much as a cat can serve. But he survived 3 different shipwrecks somehow. Just the ship went down and the cat was swimming around and being okay and was plucked out of the water 3 separate times.
Wow.
I mean, everyone called him Unsinkable Sam, but his real name was Oscar.
Why did they call him Sam?
I mean, it just sounds better than Unsinkable Oscar.
Sure.
Ian Fleming had a quote about Unsinkable Sam. It says, "Once is happenstance, twice is coincidence, 3 times is enemy action."
Oh, Unsinkable Sam. I'll have to look him up.
Yeah, the ultimate saboteur. So apparently he was on board a Nazi vessel that was sank by the Royal Navy.
Yeah.
And they plucked this cat out of the water. And then he was on this Royal Navy ship that then got hit and sank. And again, the cat was plucked out of the water. And there was a 3rd Royal Navy ship that sank and the cat was again plucked out of the water.
So he's really a survivor.
Yeah.
I want to talk about 2 different novels before we kind of wrap out this old-timey ship section. The first is a modern series, Master and Commander, written by Patrick O'Brien, and my father is a huge fan of this series. The story takes place during the Napoleonic Wars. And also in this vein is The Sea Wolf by Jack London, which tells the story of a boat that collides with another boat in the San Francisco Bay. Speaking of superstition and bad luck, let's talk about the sinking of the Titanic. But first, let's discuss the sinking of the SS Arctic. And there's actually a beautiful memorial to a lot of the people who perished with the sinking of the SS Arctic in Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery. On September 27th, 1854, the SS Arctic sank about 50 miles off the coast of Newfoundland. The tragedy was caused by a collision with another smaller ship, the SS Vesta. The Arctic sank 4 hours after the hit. During those 4 hours, there was panic among the passengers and crew, as folks struggled for access to lifeboats and attempted to make rafts from debris. The ship was one of the Collins line of ships. Of the estimated 400 souls on board, only 88 survived, most of whom were crew members. None of the women or children survived. This disaster is marked by the fact that the crew prioritized saving their own lives over the lives of the passengers.
Typical.
Which, I mean, I kind of fucking understand. You have these rich people on board, like...
They're useless. Eat the rich.
Eat the rich. A media frenzy spiraled after the event, newspapers calling out the actions of the crew. So the plot in Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery that's dedicated to this event has over 70 burials. It's a Victorian-era monument that was designed by John M. Moffat, and I've been to it several times and photographed it and taken videos. So I'll post something when this episode comes out so you guys can see the visuals of it. There's also a depiction of the Arctic sinking in the center of the monument. The silver lining is that the sinking of the SS Arctic caused massive maritime safety reform. The Arctic had only 6 lifeboats, space for less than half of the people on board. But the designers of the Titanic didn't take this disaster seriously enough. 14 years before the sinking of the Titanic, a novella called Futility was released about the sinking of a fictional ship called the Titan. Pretty similar.
I think I see where this is going.
Not only that, but the novel seemed to strangely and morbidly predict the other aspects of the tragedy. For example, the ship in the novella also hits an iceberg, and both the Titan and the Titanic did not have enough lifeboats for the passengers on board. The ships were also fairly similar in size and passenger count. Futility was written by Morgan Robertson, who rejected claims that he was psychic. Futility was edited in 1912 after the sinking of the Titanic. So I think that's just really interesting, right? That you have the SS Arctic, which happens before. Then you have this novel called Futility that talks about a ship called the Titan that hits an iceberg and sinks and doesn't have enough lifeboats on board. And all of that predates the actual sinking of the Titanic.
Yeah, I think it's a big coincidence that the exact, well, almost exact name in kind of like the same type of ship or same situations around the sinking came to play.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think there's anything supernatural about it.
The Titanic was a British ocean liner that sank on April 15th, 1912. As we all know from the movie, this was the result of the ship hitting an iceberg in the Atlantic mid-voyage. The ship was heading to New York City from Southampton, England. 1,496 passengers and crew died. 2,224 total souls were on board.
These are things that modern ships don't have to worry about. There's no icebergs anymore.
I thought you were going to say, oh, yeah, we have better safety measures for helicopter rescue.
No, we have fossil fuels and global warming.
At the time, this was the deadliest ship sinking of all time. The Titanic was thought to be an unsinkable ship. Her name came from the Titans of Greek mythology. But a lot of this was a result of intense competition and the need of these potential passengers to be given this dream experience. And it worked on that level. Some of the wealthiest people of their time were on board when the boat launched from the United Kingdom. So the Titanic really was a successful marketing campaign, right? It was deemed the unsinkable ship, this huge technological advancement in ship and luxury experience, right? And it worked because listen to the rich and famous who were on board. John Jacob Astor, Benjamin Guggenheim, Isidore Straus, who owned Macy's, heiress Molly Brown. J.P. Morgan was supposed to be on board, but changed his plans at the last minute. Milton S. Hershey, Lady Duff Gordon, mystery writer Jacques Frutel, George Dunton Widener, the owner of the Philadelphia Traction Company, and Broadway producer Henry B. Harris, just to name a few.
Also, Leonardo DiCaprio.
And Kate Winslet. Titanic was part of the White Star Line's Olympic class of ships. The idea was to build 3 ships, each measuring 882 feet long and 92.5 feet wide, making them the largest ships of their time. Construction on Titanic started in March of 1909 and continued for 2 years. Quoting from the History.com article, quote, on May 31st, 1911, Titanic's immense hull, the largest movable man-made object in the world at the time, made its way down the slipways and into the River Lagan in Belfast. More than 100,000 people attended the launching, which took just over a minute and went off without a hitch. The hull was immediately towed to a mammoth-fitting outdock, where thousands of workers would spend most of the next year building the ship's decks, constructing her lavish interiors, and installing the 29 giant boilers that would power her 2 main steam engines, end quote. The infamous watertight compartments of Titanic, which was the element that made Shipbuilder magazine deem the ship unsinkable, were actually part of the reason that she sank. While the bulkheads were watertight, the ship's designers left a space between the walls that only surpassed the waterline by a few feet, enabling water to travel from one compartment to the next.
That was a bad design.
Also famously, the other main issue was the lack of lifeboats. There were only 16 lifeboats and 4 collapsible devices. That meant that there were only seats in lifeboats for 1,178 of the 2,224 passengers on board. Even more startling is that her full capacity was over 3,300 people. This wasn't illegal, though. The number of lifeboats was both in compliance and actually exceeded the British Board of Trade's requirements. More than 700 of the passengers were in third class, greater in number than first and second class combined, which is something to think about when everybody also reflects on the famous first-class passengers on board, right? The majority of the life lost here were not the rich and famous. The Titanic departed from Southampton on April 10th, 5 days before the disaster. Almost immediately, the ship had 2 bizarre occurrences. The first was a coal fire in one of the bunkers, and the second was a narrow miss with another ship, called the SS New York. Despite warnings from other ships in the area, Titanic did not alter course in an effort to avoid the iceberg until a lookout spotted it from a crow's nest. At this point, it was too late. Though, because of the reversal of the engines, she did sideswipe the mass instead of hitting it directly.
Which apparently was bad.
Yes, either way, it would have been bad.
Well, no, apparently it would have been survivable if they just hit straight on. I don't know. One of the documentaries on all this.
Yeah, I believe it.
It's because one too many compartments got punctured.
Right, at once, yeah. The ship hid along its hull under the water, and many on board didn't even feel the collision. The ice tore a 300-foot gash along the hull. Fairly quickly, compartments started to fill with water, and the bow of the ship started to slant downwards, which we all know from the movie. The architect of the ship, Thomas Andrews, calculated that Titanic would stay afloat for an hour and a half tops, and the captain called for lifeboats to be loaded. In reality, she stayed afloat for almost 3 hours.
What does Andrews know?
The ship fell into chaos. Such chaos, in fact, that the first lifeboat left with only 28 of its 65 seats filled.
Well, they came back.
Almost every lifeboat left under capacity. All of the sources for this series are in the first episode, and they're also in the description of this episode. But I'm going to quote again from the History.com article on Titanic. Quote, "Hundreds of human dramas unfolded between the order to load the lifeboats and the ship's final plunge. Men saw off wives and children, families were separated in the confusion, and selfless individuals gave up their spots to remain with loved ones or allow a more vulnerable passenger to escape. In the end, 706 people survived the sinking of the Titanic." End quote. John Jacob Astor helped his pregnant wife onto a boat. He asked if he could accompany her and was rejected. He kissed her goodbye and drowned aboard the ship, as did Thomas Andrews, the architect, who was last seen staring at a painting of the ship in a smoking room alone. Isidor Straus had the chance to leave on a lifeboat, but didn't want the special treatment. His wife stayed behind with him, and they went back to their cabin and died together, which I think is a pretty famous scene in Titanic. Also famously, Molly Brown helped load lifeboats until she was forced into one. As she does in the movie, she urged the boat to go back for more survivors, but she's refused because they think that they'll be mobbed by those floating in the water and drowned. Guggenheim and his valet put on their formal clothes and declared, quote, "We are dressed in our best and are prepared to go down like gentlemen," end quote. And of course, we know more of the stories of the rich and famous, but just as the majority of the souls on board were crew and third class, so were the majority of deaths. At 2:20 a.m., Titanic was fully perpendicular when she finally sank below the surface of the Atlantic. Another ship, the Carpathia, received the distress calls and picked up the survivors from the lifeboats. Again, 706 in total. Over the years, many conspiracy theories tied to this disaster have emerged, but one thing remains clear. The sinking of the Titanic has felt like a moral allegory for many. The overconfidence and underpreparedness of the ship's creators resulted in a horrifying disaster and loss of life. Some compare Titanic to the Challenger space shuttle disaster. Both were cutting-edge modern technology, and it was hard to accept, after so much hype and excitement, that they failed so miserably so quickly. Another instance of flying too close to the sun. It wasn't until 1985 that the Titanic wreck was located. The story of the Titanic's tragic fate has been turned into one of the most popular and successful movies of our lifetime so far. Produced, written, and directed by James Cameron.
He's great. Starring
Leonardo DiCaprio and Kate Winslet, a defining moment from my childhood, the 2 VHS tapes. With a budget of $200 million, Titanic brought in over $2.2 billion. Cameron had a fascination with shipwrecks and considered the RMS Titanic the, quote, Everest of shipwrecks. The film includes footage from the actual wreck, which Cameron and his crew shot at 12 times in 1995. Quoting from Wikipedia, quote, "At that depth, with a water pressure of 6,000 pounds per square inch, one small flaw in the vessel's superstructure would mean instant death for all on board."
Not true. As we learned from Jason Statham in the Meg 2, The Trench,
yeah,
it's only because you have air in your lungs. If you fill every cavity of your body with water, you can survive anything.
That's right. Not only were the dives high risk, but adverse conditions prevented Cameron from getting the high-quality footage that he wanted. During one dive, one of the submersibles collided with Titanic's hull, damaging both sub and ship, and leaving fragments of the submersible's propeller scattered around the superstructure. The external bulkhead of Captain Smith's quarters collapsed, exposing the interior. The area around the entrance to the grand staircase was also damaged, end quote. So here he goes in, floppy fingers Cameron, so dedicated to, his work, and then he goes and he fucks up the thing that he's trying to, immortalize, which is kind of ironic, I think.
It's like hugging the puppy too hard.
What does that mean? What is that? I don't like that. Alan, that's very dark.
Yeah, I just wanted to pet the rabbits.
You're making me nervous that you're holding my cat right now while you make these jokes. Quoting from James Cameron, quote, It was an event that happened to real people who really died. Working around the wreck for so much time, you get such a strong sense of the profound sadness and injustice of it and the message of it. You think, there probably aren't going to be many filmmakers who go to Titanic. There may never be another one. Maybe a documentarian, end quote. I mean, he's just so full of himself. I don't know.
This guy goes wherever he wants. He goes to the bottom of the ocean. He goes even deeper into the abyss. He goes to freaking Pandora. You know, like wherever. This guy gets what he wants.
Has he been to space?
You got to go through space to get to Pandora.
That's a good point. So, fun fact, Cameron actually sketched the portrait of Rose that Jack draws in the movie.
He probably drew that before he came up with the idea for the movie, and then just like
filled in the face.
Yeah, just filled in the gaps.
Filled in the boobs. Titanic swept awards season, bringing home 4 Golden Globes and 14 Academy Awards. I also want to talk about a film called A Night to Remember from 1958, which is also about the sinking of the Titanic. This version of the story is more focused on the characters and how they handle what's happening versus the actual sinking of the ship. It's part of the Criterion Collection and by all accounts is incredibly powerful.
Let's not forget Ghostbusters 2, when the Titanic comes into port in New York and then all the ghosts leave the ship, finally reaching their destination.
Very cathartic for viewers.
Wait, not their destination. It's the reverse.
It's their destination. It started in England and it's coming here.
What? Why? But isn't Jack an American?
Yeah, but he was in Europe. He was coming home.
What's he doing there?
Remember, he's from Wisconsin. He was going to come home and bring her to his farm.
I don't remember that.
Well, maybe you didn't watch it close enough.
I watched tape 2.
I'm sure you did. All right. So one final thing that I want to discuss. It feels fitting for some reason to end with Castaways. Robinson Crusoe was first published on April 25th, 1719. It was written by Daniel Defoe. In the novel, the main character is stranded on an island for 28 years. Many believe the story is based on the real-life person, Alexander Selkirk. Alexander Selkirk was a Scottish privateer and Royal Navy officer who was marooned by his captain on an uninhabited island in the South Pacific. Selkirk was marooned as punishment after he got into a fight with the captain over how seaworthy the ship was. Selkirk thought that the worm-infested boat wouldn't stay afloat much longer. He stayed behind on the island with very little supplies. He spent 4 years and 4 months as a castaway, putting notches in trees, chasing goats, and reading his Bible. And I always kind of wonder, how did goats get on this island?
I mean, there's so many goats in Robinson Crusoe.
This is the story that inspired that. He was eventually rescued by a band of privateers led by Captain Woodes Rogers as they stopped on the island. At first, he was unable to speak. He couldn't remember how to communicate with other humans. But eventually, he gained minor celebrity status in England after the ordeal.
He brought the goats back.
That was the first time anyone else in the world had goats.
That's right. That was the
introduction of goats to society.
Now they're an invasive species everywhere.
That's right.
Like the lanternfly, you're supposed to stomp on them.
The film Castaway from 2000 stars Tom Hanks as a man who becomes stranded on a deserted island in the South Pacific after a plane crash.
You are not allowed to talk about Castaway.
Why?
You have not seen the movie. I love that movie so much, and you have not seen it.
I'm going to set you up to talk about it.
No, I refuse, because I refuse to spoil anything about that incredible work of masterpiece.
The film was such a success, it brought in over $429 million, which made it the third highest grossing film of 2000. Hanks won Best Actor at the Golden Globes and was nominated for the Best Lead at the Academy Awards.
And Wilson won Best Supporting Actor.
There you go. I know that's the volleyball. I know a lot about that movie.
I know, because you've Googled it instead of just watching the damn thing.
Because I grew up when it was a movie and there was thousands of trailers and memes and jokes about Wilson.
It's so good.
Okay, Alan. This leads us to the end of our Horror on the High Seas series. What are your conclusive thoughts on ocean horror?
We talked about a lot of stuff.
We talked about a lot.
Yeah. What was your favorite part?
I really liked the Bermuda Triangle stuff.
You would.
I really liked the Titanic and
you would.
The shipwreck stuff. What's your favorite part?
I like talking about Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah, which you did endlessly.
Ghost ships are pretty cool.
We love ghost ships.
And I'm going to double down about the scariest part, generally, of horror on the high seas is that water is unbreathable.
All right. There you go. Not to everybody.
You take that away, and you're left with only a few things.
I don't know. A lot of the sea creature stuff that we were talking about still applies. A lot of the shipwreck stuff still applies.
What do you mean the
Pressure-
shipwreck stuff?
Pressure in the Mariana Trench still applies.
I mean,
Your
no.
boat can still sink, and
You're
you
not-
still have to swim,
If
and you're
you
in the middle
could
of the
breathe
Atlantic.
water, you could go right to the bottom, fill your lungs just like Jason Statham, and then walk to freedom.
If you're in the middle of the Atlantic, do you know how far that is from land?
It's far, yeah, but it's been done.
It's been done?
Yeah.
By who?
There's this great episode where Superman's fighting Metallo,
Uh-huh.
and he just like knocks Metallo way the fuck out into the ocean.
Metallo.
Who's Metallo? Metallo is this like guy that hates Superman,
Yeah.
and Lex Luthor turns him into a cyborg powered by kryptonite.
Wow.
So it's like, he's basically indestructible. He's powered by kryptonite. What's Superman going to do? Well, he just throws him out into the middle of the Pacific Ocean.
That's all you can do, really.
And so he's made of metal. He goes right to the bottom, and then he's forced to do nothing but like spend the next few months walking back to shore.
Fascinating. Okay. Well, thank you guys all for being here. This was a really fun one. I felt like it was a bit of an anthology series, right? Because we talked about a lot, not incredibly deeply, but in a fun, hopefully, way that kept things moving.
This is not the end, though,
It's not the end.
because we have so many stories.
And I just want to say, for so long, this podcast was fueled on me having to write stories for these topics because nobody else was. We didn't have enough listeners. Nobody knew about it. And we had so many submissions, so many good submissions, very good, that I think we have 11 stories that we are going to present over the next few episodes.
You pared it down to 11?
Yeah. And I couldn't possibly get it any tighter because they are so fucking good. And
Wow.
it makes me honestly a bit emotional because it just seems to be a bit of a testament to, to our growth here and what's happened over the past few years. So thank you all for that. I am so excited to present these stories to you guys in the next few episodes. It will be the first time that we have had a multi-part Lunatics library. And I think that's really cool because so much of the joy that we get from this podcast is being able to incorporate other people and create a community here. So very excited about that. And finally, please check out our Horror on the High Seas merch. We are so in love with the spooky design by our friend Pilar Kep. If you head to lunaticsproject.com and click on merch, you will see that design, plus tons of our other horrifying and spooky sweatshirts and tote bags and t-shirts and tanks. We really appreciate any purchases you guys make. It means a lot to us, and it does help us keep going here on the podcast. So next time we will be back with some spooky ocean-themed stories for you. Until then, stay well, stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Goodbye.
Thanks for listening. If you'd like some bonus content, consider supporting us on Patreon to access our patron-exclusive podcast, Horror Movie Club.
Also, head to lunaticsproject.com to check out our spooky merch and apparel.
You can find us at Lunatics Project on Twitter and TikTok, and The Lunatics Project on Instagram and YouTube, where you'll find our short horror films, cemetery tours, and so much more.
And please rate and review. A little feedback goes a long way to help us grow and get more content out there.
Our cover art is by Pilar Kep, and musical bumpers are by Michaela Papa and Jordan Moser.